Many of the top baseball countries in the world are Spanish-speaking countries, once part of the old Spanish Empire. Cuba, Dominican Republic, Venezuela, Mexico, just to name a few. And from their independence to the present day, a lot of people from these new countries have migrated back to the old one. This might lead you to assume that, through the strength of their baseball-playing Latin American immigrants, they'd be the strongest European country in baseball. And while it is one of the stronger countries, they're usually ranked third on the continent, with several other countries right on their heels. The relationship between baseball and Spain got off to a rough start. Its first major presence in the Spanish Empire was in Cuba, and it quickly became associated with the independence movement there. Naturally, this didn't sit well with the mother country, who wanted its colonies to stick with the national sport of bullfighting. So in 1869, baseball was prohibited throughout the empire. But that didn't stop baseball's momentum. Quite the opposite, actually. It spread to the other areas of the Spanish Caribbean, a symbol of their independence, and soon became the national pastime for these new nations. And that is why today baseball is huge in the Spanish-speaking Caribbean, but not in Spain. Decades after the Spanish-American War, Spain was on friendly terms with its former colonies. The ban on baseball was lifted, and they were receiving immigration from the New World. Cuban immigrants are credited with bringing baseball to Spain in the early decades of the 20th century. It didn't gain much of a following at first. Native Spaniards may have been weary of embracing the sport that symbolized the collapse of their empire. But by the 1940s, that was all long forgotten. The game was being played more and more. 1944 was a big year for the growth of baseball in Spain. The Spanish Baseball Federation was established and launched an organized league. Football clubs started forming teams, among them Real Madrid, FC Barcelona, and Atletico Madrid. Soon after, they were competing internationally, and a rivalry quickly grew with Italy, another South European country where baseball was on the rise. In 1954, the first European Baseball Championships were held, and it was these two countries that reached the final, with Italy coming out on top 7-4 and being crowned the first ever baseball champions of Europe. In 1955, the second European Baseball Championships took place, in Spain. The Spanish team once again reached the final, this time facing Belgium, won 2-0 to claim the gold. 66 years later, they are still in search of their second title. The European Champions Cup started in 1963. The Spanish team claimed the first two championships, Picadero Barcelona in '63 and Piratas de Madrid in '64. Those same two clubs earned one more title each in the late 60s. But the start of the 70s was the start of Italian and Dutch dominance. 1969 was the last time a Spanish team finished in the top three. Like in several other European countries, baseball's popularity in Spain peaked in the 1950s, declined in the 60s, and struggled for the rest of the 20th century. That was the time when soccer became a dominant sport, thanks in large part to the TV coverage it received. Not only baseball, but a lot of less popular sports lost fans. But there's always been enough support to keep it going, and recent years have seen slow but steady growth. The domestic league was known as the Spanish Baseball Championship from 1944 to 1985. From '86 to 2020, it was called División de Honor. This year, it was rebranded as the Spanish Baseball League. In the early days, FC Barcelona, Real Madrid, and Atletico Madrid were the most successful teams. These teams no longer compete, though FC Barcelona competed until just recently, winning their last title in 2011. The baseball club broke away from FC Barcelona and now competes as Club Baseball Barcelona. In this century, Marlins Puerto Cruz, also known as Tenerife Marlins, have won 12 championships, including 5 in a row from 2005 to 2009, and 6 out of 7 years from 2013 to 2019. Astros Valencia were the champions in 2020. A lot of Venezuelans and some other Latin American ball players can be found there, usually not ex-major leaguers, but quite often players with minor league experience. The league gets decent fan support, not as big of crowds as you'll find in Italy or the Netherlands, but more than you'll see at games in France or the UK. The national baseball team of Spain, as I mentioned before, was one of the most successful countries in the early days of European baseball. In the past decade, they've had some new success stories. In the 2013 World Baseball Classic qualifier, they beat France, South Africa, and Israel to earn a place at the big tournament. In the WBC, they went 0-3, losing to fellow Spanish-speaking countries and baseball powerhouses, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, and Venezuela, but losing respectably each time, no mercy rule. But they couldn't match that success at the 2017 qualifier, falling to Colombia and France and going home winless. For the cancelled 2021 qualifier, they were put in qualifier 2, with Great Britain, New Zealand, Philippines, Czech Republic, and Panama. And they would have had a good chance of advancing. Only Panama and Czech Republic were ranked higher. In this year's WBSC World Rankings, Spain is number 19, 4th highest in Europe, 1 place behind Germany and 2 behind Italy, so a little improvement could bump them up to number 2 on the continent. Very recently, they've been putting a lot of effort into growing the game domestically and strengthening the skills of local players, from youth to adult. Right now, the national team is comprised of mostly ex-major leaguers and ex-minor leaguers from the Caribbean. They've come to realize that it's a better long-term strategy to develop homegrown talent, though Latin American players will continue to be imported to play with and against the locals to help strengthen the overall talent of the country. In 2019, they finished third in the European Baseball Championship, behind the Netherlands and Italy, which qualified them for the Europe-Africa Olympic qualifier, where they were tied with Italy for fourth, behind Israel, Netherlands, and Czech Republic. A strong finish, but not enough to keep their Olympic hopes alive. They do have one appearance at the Olympics. In 1992, when baseball made its debut as an Olympic medal sport, the games were held in Barcelona, so Spain automatically qualified as host. They were 1-6, placing last. They only scored 4 runs in their first 5 games, falling to Taiwan and Cuba by a combined 38-0. But their hitting picked up at the end, and they were able to pull off a 7-6 upset of Puerto Rico in their final game. This would have to be considered the biggest baseball event to ever take place on Spanish soil. Unfortunately, the games weren't followed by a wave of newfound enthusiasm for baseball, as the Spanish baseball community had hoped for. Games were played at 2 separate venues. The larger of the two, seating 7,000, was converted into a soccer stadium in 1999. An event dedicated strictly to baseball might generate some interest. Major League Baseball has considered holding a regular season series in Spain, but it doesn't seem to be near the top of their list. If they did decide to hold a series there, the most suitable venue would probably be Estadio Olímpic Lluís Companys in Barcelona. There have been 4 players born in Spain to play at the Major League level. The first was shortstop Al Cabrera from the Spanish-owned Canary Islands. In 1913, he played in just 1 Major League game, only taking 2 at-bats. But that one game was historic. Not only did he become the first Major League player born in Spain, but since the Canary Islands are just off the coast of Morocco, he can be considered the first African-born Major League player. He had better luck in Cuba, where his professional career lasted 20 years and ended with an induction into the Cuban Baseball Hall of Fame. Aside from Cabrera, 3 other Spanish-born players reached MLB in the 1980s and 1990s, but their playing careers didn't go anywhere, and they were only born in Spain, not raised and developed as players there. It won't be long before someone born and raised in Spain reaches the highest levels of professional baseball, and I would bet that it'll be the son of Venezuelan immigrants, or Cuban immigrants, or whatever. That probably would have happened already, but they were mostly relying on foreign imports before, and were not too concerned with developing the talent of local players. But now they're putting the resources in place, and Spain continues to get more immigration from baseball-playing countries than any other country in Europe, so they have a real chance in the near future to drastically improve the quality of their young players. So someday when you see a Rodriguez, Ramirez, or Gonzalez in the big leagues, he might not be from the Americas. Anyway, that's all for this one, and until next time, this is Baseball International. See ya!